Hello and welcome to Cool Coffee with Kansas Principals, a podcast by and for school administrators where principals are featured, discussion is candid, and insight on this great profession is shared. My name is Rick Sola, and as Communications Director for the Kansas Principals Association, I am the host, but I am certainly not the feature. Sit back, take a sip, and enjoy. This is Cool Coffee with Kansas Principals. Let's get started. Hey, Cool Coffee listeners. Before we get started, please consider leaving a review of this show on your favorite podcast platform. Doing so helps promote the show, all we're doing at the KPA for principals, and further highlights our guests and their insights. Thanks so much for listening to KPA's Cool Coffee with Kansas Principals. Now enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to Cool Coffee. I'm here today with a peer-proclaimed PLC guru, Ariel Jankord of Lincoln Elementary School, home of the Lions, USD 290 in the Ottawa School District. She started her educational career as an elementary educator, teaching first, second, fourth, and was a K-5 special teacher for STEM. Initially got a master's in technology and loved being innovative in the classroom and helping other educators do the same. She was encouraged to pursue a degree in administration, but never in a million years thought that she would become a principal. About the time she started, she took an instructional coaching job and started believing being a principal may not be so bad. And here she is. She just finished her third year as an elementary principal. Ariel, is it that bad? What do you think?
No, it's not as bad as I imagined.
What was that initial trepidation?
Oh, I don't know. I don't want to be like in charge of all the things, right? Like my classroom, I have like my autonomy to do my thing. And I don't know. I just never really saw myself there. But over the years, actually, several people were like, when you're a principal, I'm going to come work for you. And I'm like, that's never going to happen. So, but I took a jump and I actually love it. And it's probably a good fit for me. So.
No, that's awesome, and I've talked to so many people through this podcast, and it's a very common story that the person who's in the chair did not see themselves in the chair, and I put myself in that. I think I would have thought I was crazy, or someone was crazy, if I was an early teacher and someone said, "Oh, you're going to be a principal someday." Like, no, that's not going to happen. And so, and then I did mention that you are a peer-proclaimed PLC guru. So you were nominated for this show, or recommended for this show by one of your colleagues there in Ottawa who speaks so very highly of you, and friend of the show, Kelly Whitaker. And so before we hit record here, I was wondering how much does she owe you for this?
Maybe at least a morning coffee or something.
Okay, Kelly, if you're listening, as the first day of school comes up, the morning coffee of Ariel's choice. So
maybe really delivered to my building.
Yeah, and it better be piping hot, not cool coffee. Not cool coffee.
That's right.
So, but I was intrigued, and when Kelly did reach out, and she had just really wonderful things to say, and you and I have, we've crossed paths in various conferences over the last couple of years, and I appreciate your support of this show because you've contributed to the perspective pieces, and I'm really excited because as this will air very early in the school year, PLCs, they're more than just a trendy buzzword. They've been around now for a long, long time. And I think we all are every year we still find our way with it. And there's different things that we need to do. There's adjustments. It evolves from PLC to PLC. And so when Kelly did reach out and was talking about you and some of the things that you're doing, it just feels very applicable to all of us who would be listening to this podcast. So as you think of a PLC and being a strong instructional leader, we'll just start with this. What does a strong PLC mean to you, and then what does it look like in practice from day to day?
Yeah, I think in my role as the principal, it's really about setting up the expectations and the procedures around PLC without micromanaging it, and that can be really hard because if you're not really comfortable and with PLCs yourself, then it's hard to guide staff through without creating this really strict agenda and like these notes that they have to fill out that aren't meaningful to teachers. And so I think I've had various experiences throughout my education career with PLCs and have kind of seen models that are really strong and ones that are not as strong. And I think pulling from that, I had a unique opportunity where we got to open a new building in Spring Hill. And I was the coach at the time, and we were pulling from 4 elementaries and putting all these teachers in one building. And my principal and I at the time, we worked really hard to establish what does PLC look like in our building. And I really just replicated that when I went to be a principal. I took those same principles and I still do it every year. So every year, August in service, we spend time establishing what does PLC mean, what does it look like, what are kind of our outcomes, what should we see come out of that time together. And I think that clarity is so important to making it a meaningful time. When I first started as a principal, that staff was like, oh yeah, we're used to like cleaning out closets during PLC and like getting to do field trip stuff. And they knew that wasn't PLC, but they hadn't had any direction. And so they were like, yeah, whatever, you can give us your spiel, but we know how this is gonna go. And by the end of my first year, they were already going, oh my gosh, you were right. Like now I don't schedule my doctor appointments on PLC days because we have early release. And that used to be their prime time for like getting appointments in. So I think if you can bring clarity and really define what that looks like for your building, your teachers will see it as meaningful and they will lean into that, and it will make an impact on your students and staff for that matter, just getting people more on the same page and working together. So my really simple foundation of that is that during PLC, they have to be working on one of the 4 questions. What do we want students to learn? How are we going to know they learned it? What are we doing with students that aren't learning it? And what are we doing with students that have already mastered it? And so as long as the work they're doing is within those 4 questions, then that is what can be done during our PLC time.
So you kind of answered, you mentioned the principles that you go through every August. And I love that you said that, because I think we can get into a position, whether it's PLCs or any of the number of things that we do, as principals, we have expectations, and it can be really easy to assume that they've got it. They've heard this spiel from me so many times. We have so many other things to do. Why don't we just, I'll flip it out maybe. I'll put it in an email like, hey, reminder. I think that sends a really strong message to invest that time at the start of every year, even when everybody knows like, oh, this is a refresher, this is a reminder, but it shows where your priorities are. But you mentioned that balance between like micromanaging, like setting the expectations, but micromanaging, especially maybe going back a couple of years when you were a first year teacher there. They're trying to figure you out. You're new. How did you go about that? How did you establish expectations while giving them a chance to own it, but also falling within your framework?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of figuring out what the non-negotiables were. So for me, I wanted a common place where teachers were entering data from their formative assessments, and specifically their common formative assessments. So I created a spreadsheet where they enter. We only did math my first year. So that was a way of like not biting off more than we could chew. So like I'm new, and I'm giving them a new sheet that I want them to enter data on. And actually I spent some time in Olathe. My Google Sheet is Mastery Connect just in Google Sheets. So I took a lot of those principles, because that's what I was used to, and built it in that way. And so it does a lot of cool things for them to make it easy to analyze the data. And before school started, I actually met with a BLT. Obviously I was new, and walked them through, and I gave them fake student data and like had actually done assessments like as a second grade math student, and had them grade it, and we went through the whole process. They put it in the data sheet, they analyzed the data, they made a plan for what they were going to do, but all like mock PLC. And I did that with BLT first because I wanted to get their reaction. Like, was this like crazy? Was this something they're used to? It just feels different. And so they kind of gave me feedback, and I was able to just kind of read the room through that process. And then we did it with the whole staff. So then my BLT kind of knew how PLC was going to flow, what are the different steps. And we did it all together, again, with fake data, and we entered that in. And then the first several PLCs were very much guided by me. And I wouldn't say micromanaged, it was just very like, we're going to do this together and we're going to do it step by step. Again, only doing math. And as teams like got going, like I would be like, okay, you're going to decide what your common formative assessment is for the next time we meet. And it was just like, you could kind of see which teams could take off. And they were like, we've got this, we know what we're doing. And you could kind of back off. And then there was teams that needed more support, and I spent more time with them during that time. We have the blessing of extended or early release, so I was able to work with those teachers, and there was no students in the building pulling me away from that time, which is a blessing because I was able to be there and be present and answer their questions. And I think they appreciated that credibility of I was present during that process. So that was kind of how we got it going. And then through that, I think they saw what those expectations were. But I never have a formal agenda. We have a process of the steps we follow, and it's just from solution tree PLC. I've not deviated from anything that they have kind of outlined, and we just follow those 4 questions over and over and over. And occasionally I do have a team that's kind of veering off, and I have to go back and be like, hey, I think we're getting off track here, or we're not collecting the right data, or sometimes they come to me too. I need support, and that's when I step in. But I really think setting up in the beginning and doing the work. It's so easy to talk at teachers and professional development and kind of do these sit and get things and talk about PLCs, but I just felt like it was so much more meaningful by doing it. It was kind of more work on my end to get all this student work, and maybe if I planned ahead I could pull some work and keep it aside, but I think them going through their process was the best way for them to learn and get really good at it.
What is, for you, a strong PLC? We talk about, this is a really strong PLC. What is that going to look like at Lincoln? What kind of flow, what kind of agenda, your role in that strong PLC versus, or maybe your lack of role, what does that look like?
So the teams that are the strongest are the ones that are really collaborating together and are, willing to, compromise isn't even the right word, because it's really just about collaboration. When they're in sync and they're almost thinking for each other when it comes to looking at assessments, designing assessments, and even coming back and looking at the data, because that's another piece of it, is making sure that we're all grading the data the same way. And that's a big piece that gets lost, is we might all say, hey, we're going to give the unit 3 exit ticket, but then every teacher grades it differently. And so my PLC teams that are really strong are the ones that can come together and say, this is what mastery looks like, this is what progressing looks like, this is what needs support looks like. They're giving the assessments in the same way, so they're planning, are we going to read aloud the questions to students? Are we going to give them immediate feedback? And all of those things are really important to making sure it's a true common assessment, rather than, well, we picked the same assessment, but then we all just gave it a different way. We all graded it a different way. And now we're looking at apples to oranges when we look at the data. And so it's really hard to provide any kind of intervention or adjust our instruction, because it's like, oh, well, I gave it and the fire alarm went off in the middle of it. Well, if we had all picked the same day, the fire alarm would have gone off in the middle of all of our tests. But when one teacher has a different experience in the classroom, it's really hard then to look at those scores together and make the right decisions on how we're going to respond.
When you talk about that balance, how do you view the PLC? Who's running the meeting? Is it you kind of directing, or do one of your teachers, or is it kind of, in the perfect world, they're just bouncing off each other?
Yeah, so early on, like I said, and really every year, because I kind of reset, I would say I'm heavily guiding it. The first probably 3 weeks, it's me saying, okay, we're picking our first common assessment. We're going to be entering next time, so make sure you have it ready. Make sure that you've given it to students. But most of my teams, it's mostly led by our BLT member. I've really structured BLT to be a learning experience more than a just logistical meeting. And so it's my expectation, and my BLT members know that they're team lead. And I know in middle school and high school, that's kind of natural. Like a lot of you guys have chairs for content areas. And that's kind of just how I view our BLT members for each grade level, is they're really the driver of that team and making sure that they're on task. And so I would say I lean on them mostly.
So this is one time a week you meet, or is it multiple times?
Yeah, so we all meet, we have early release on Friday afternoon, so we release at 2:05, and we have from about 2:30 to 3:40. And I would say our interventionists, because we're all doing it at the same time, our interventionists, we have math and reading are available, our counselors available, our social workers available. So they're also in there, and sometimes they're kind of guiding at different times. Like if there's something that needs to happen in reading during MTSS time, then they may say, hey, we need to meet during PLC and make some decisions on what we're doing in reading time.
So someone might be listening to this and be thinking, oh, my school we have PLCs. We're not seeing any results. What do you think they're missing, if that is how someone's feeling right now?
Yeah, I think, I would say time, because a lot of, when I talk to different districts or different school systems, I present about this, and then people are like, well, this is my situation, and you have to have dedicated time. It's not something you can do very quickly to really get into it. Having a 30-minute time is you just start getting into the weeds, get into the work, and then your time is up. And I know that's not something that every district has. So that can be a huge challenge. But out of things that you have control over, I think a big piece is making sure that your teams feel confident in themselves and the process. And I think as a leader, that's what I mean by recognizing the teams that can take off and they're rolling, let them go. And focus your energy on time on those that need some additional support. Because sometimes some of our teams just don't collaborate at the same level as others. Sometimes they have very differing viewpoints on how things should be graded and how we should support students during an assessment. And so by being there and helping kind of get through and create some balance on a team on those kind of controversial topics, each team has to find kind of their flow and kind of their own set of expectations. How does this work for third grade? Because third grade and kindergarten are very different. So each team kind of has to find that, and that's just more difficult for other teams than some. So I think that's where the principal's presence, the leader's presence, is really important.
You kind of alluded to it. Do your teams establish norms? Do you help establish norms? Are there, I'm thinking about, so our PLCs are a little different where we have a common plan time for our teachers and it's more grade level, but depending on the time of day or the hour of the day, some of the teachers have been teaching for maybe 4 straight hours, and the class ended, well, it's technically the PLC hour, but gosh, they need a break. They need to run to the office and do things. Are there some established norms that you have in place? You mentioned non-negotiables earlier. Is that where some of these fall? Or is it really kind of, like you said, kindergarten's a lot different than third grade and they have some different needs?
Yeah, I think the 2 non-negotiables for me are that we're working on around those 4 questions, and then the data sheet that we have created and are using, because that's a common place where all the teachers in the grade level can access, and I can access it as well. Beyond that, we do spend time at the beginning of the year, and each team establishes their own norms. Even on a team that remains the same year to year, I have them revisit that. Some of them have established their own agenda, they have a notes page where they have running notes, and they want to hold each other accountable and make sure they're keeping track of what did we do last time, what are we expecting each other to bring to the next meeting. So that's where that autonomy, I want them to own this and it be meaningful for them, and each team functions differently. So I would say that's kind of the space, really in the norm space, where they get to kind of determine what does this look like for them.
So hopefully the product of a successful PLC is going to be seen in the classroom. And as you start to make your way as a building principal into classrooms, what is it you're hoping to see, or some of your look-fors as you go through the classrooms? And perhaps you've been a part of some of these meetings and you know what you're looking for, but what are you hoping to see as a result perhaps of some of these PLCs?
Yeah, I do think that's one wonderful thing about being involved in the PLC. Like you said, I'm hearing their conversations and then I get to see it in action in the classroom. So that's awesome. It also gives me follow-up conversation on that Friday during PLC. I can say, hey, when I was in third grade the other day, here are the things that I saw, like tell me more about this. So it gives space for that, which is awesome. I think when it comes to like really the look fors, and this is now tied into our PLC, but our building goal is very specific. And one thing this year specifically we're trying to is create these consistency across grade levels even. So for example, our building goal last year was fluency, reading fluency specifically. And so then this year we were talking about, okay, we piloted, we kind of had some space to try that out and figure out what that looks like. We've figured out, like when I've been in different grade levels, I've seen what it looks like. And so I've been able to speak into, it looks like this in fourth grade, looks like in this third grade, but let's look at our data now that we've spent a year doing this, which one was effective. And so now we've been able to like fine tune and really name those things that I should be able to see in each classroom consistently, and we do have some breakdown, like a K1 is going to look similar versus a 2-5 classroom. But I think, again, clarity with PLCs, clarity with our goal and what I'm looking for, and that's what we're really trying to build going into this year. What are those very specific things that I'm going to see when I come into your classroom during those times? And I like the sandwich of that PLC time. Like I said, we can reflect on what I saw, or I can ask about what I saw on the following. So I feel like we just have lots of touch points where we can have those conversations.
Right. So as we record this, it's technically summer. Lucky you, still summer for you. Thank you for coming in. I am back, but there's a lot to be thinking about as far as the start of a school year, and everything we're talking about really, it has a place obviously in our pre-service schedule and a point of emphasis, but a little more, I guess, broad even. But what does that first week with teachers look like as you try to set that instructional tone? You're going to talk about PLCs, revisit some of these things. What are you hoping to achieve as your teachers return in those few days before the students come back?
Yeah, I think it's just such a great time to kind of recalibrate and make sure that teachers just feel confident in going into their year, knowing what's expected, what's coming for them. And I'm excited about this year because we're really building off of what we did last year. We accomplished some good stuff with our fluency work that we did, and just narrowing that focus. Sometimes it feels like each year we've got something new, and we do have a new curriculum, but I feel like we've really focused on what are good instructional practices, and I'm just really excited about narrowing that for our teachers, and just setting the stage for what that looks like from the get-go. And that, and also behavior-wise and SEL and all of those pieces as well, kind of re-looking at what are our building expectations in the hallways, in the classrooms, in our common spaces, and just kind of unravels as the year goes on naturally. And we did a spring break reboot, which was good, but I just love the beginning of the year when we have that opportunity to really recalibrate. And I love to have fun at the beginning of the year, which I think is also super important for our staff coming back in August. I don't do a lot of like structured icebreakers. I use a app called Goose Chase, and I create a like ongoing scavenger hunt. So for the first like 5 days we're back, there's just all these challenges that get released each day. And so as they're working with their team, as they're going to lunch, as they're going, doing all these things, they can do these different challenges.
I'm going to have to steal this. Goose Chase. Yeah. I wrote it down. That sounds
really
fun.
They love it. My teachers love it. And the winning team, I buy them lunch like the second week of school. So it kind of like incentivizes them to like participate. But they all do. They love it. And there's stuff like get a picture with the superintendent, or tell a joke to our special education director. So then when they're out and about too, they're like interacting, and it's always a good time. So we kind of do that throughout our time back.
That's fun. And, as you were talking, I was thinking in my head, like, there's so much optimism at the start of a school year. And then you were really alluding to that. And then you mentioned, it just kind of unravels. And then you mentioned your spring break reboot. And it's so true. I mean, I think all of our schools, we ride the same wave. But I love the start of the year for that reason. There's so much optimism. There's so much excitement. When students come back and you see they're reconnecting, there's just so much that is a lot of fun. And I 100% agree. You've got to have some fun with staff throughout the beginning. PLCs are important stuff. It can also be a little heavy, and just there's got to be some balance there for staff. And I am going to look into Goose Chase probably tonight, because that just sounds like a lot of fun. And talking again about the start of the year, we've been talking about staff and what they're doing for students, but especially at the elementary school, well, at every school, but I'm thinking about your newbies, your kindergartners, that this is school for the first time, and maybe the new parents of kindergartners, the oldest child for them, and the nerves and all that. What are some of those intentional steps that you do to welcome all of your students either back or to Lincoln Elementary?
Yeah, so I feel like enrollment has become such an online thing, and you do it early July and never think about it again until the first day of school or whatever. We still have an in-person enrollment at my school, and part of that is the dynamics of my school. A lot of our families may not have a computer, which is harder. It's not as easy to fill out enrollment on your phone. But we open it up, and we have so many families come, and I think they just like to come and step foot in the school. But all of our new families and kindergarten families are really, really encouraged to come in. But we have a lot of our families come in. All my kindergarten teachers come that day and are available to answer parent questions, because they're starting to feel nervous and unsure. And so that's kind of our first touch point with a lot of our families. We have Meet the Teacher Night, which is probably pretty common for most schools. I do principal popsicles with the principal out on the playground. One that gets them headed back out, because otherwise they would probably just stay all evening long. But it's also a touch point for me to be able to connect with families. When I walk around the building, I felt like I was missing families, because we might be walking the same direction. So by having an intentional space for them to kind of step out and get a popsicle, for me, it's kind of a touch point. And then I think the other thing we did this last year, which I think was great, is we used to have a carnival in the spring, and we moved it to the beginning of the year. So it's the first week of September. And we felt like it was a good community event where it was just fun, and our families came and maybe connected with other families, and they got to meet their kids' friends and that kind of thing. So I think that was a good move for us, and we're going to keep that where it is. Just kind of have a fun community event early in the year.
Yeah, I love. We do an ice cream bar, and it's just funny because your strategy is similar to mine. You get it on your way out the door, and. We love that you're here. It's such a fun event, but you can get it in the parking lot. So
yeah, exactly.
Little tricks of the trade, I guess.
Yes.
So before we get into what we're going to do, some rapid fire things here, but to wrap up PLC and really kind of the anchor topic for the show, what would you say is one PLC mistake to avoid? You're a third-year principal now. There are first-year principals that are starting up and maybe feeling the way you did, maybe with less of a background that you came in with. What is a mistake to avoid?
I would be careful of agendas, and like I said, that micromanaging can be so easy to set up in the beginning because you feel like I need to hold them accountable. And what ends up happening is you may create a form that you never look at. And that is the worst thing on a teacher end, is to feel like you are filling something out that nobody's even looking at. And especially for a first year principal, you think you're going to have time to do all these things. I mean, I remember walking in my first year and thinking, I'm going to be in classrooms 80% of my day. I would love to be in the classroom 80% of my day, but most days
you're
it's
not. Oh my gosh.
I know, right? I would love to, but there's all those things that you really hope and wish for, and until you're in that position, you don't realize. So I would just be wary of setting up systems that you can't keep up with. And just, you can figure those things out later. Those are not the most important part of PLC.
Sticking with advice, perhaps for the new principal, but perhaps for someone who's coming back and hadn't thought of it before, One thing every principal should do in the first 10 days of school.
Oh, I didn't do this my first year. I had intentions to, and I was a little overwhelmed. But if you can carve it out, the last two I've done this is getting in every classroom and I read a book. And maybe that's very elementary. Maybe you can figure out something else for secondary. But I scheduled a time with every single classroom in my building and I read a book and did a short little activity with their class. I told the teacher they were welcome to leave if they want. It was kind of an extra break for the teacher. But I think most importantly, it was to get me in the classroom. And I try to look for opportunities for that anyways to not get rusty, right? Like I want to keep my skills sharp of being able to manage a classroom. But I love that time with the kids. And I think it's a good opportunity for every kid to kind of see your face and know who you are and see that you're not a scary person in a big office.
I love that. I'll have to think about how to translate that to middle school, either reading the book, but classroom to classroom. I really like that. Okay, so you were prepared for this, but you need to pick one of these to answer here. What is either A, the most embarrassing principal moment you've had, B, a story from the you can't make this up category, or C, a rule you enforced early in your principalship that you would not enforce today? Which of those do you want to tackle?
Okay, so we're going to go with this, you can't make this up. And it also kind of falls in the embarrassing category, but I've just learned to not let it bother me. I have a lot of pretty extreme behaviors in my school. And a lot of times it has to do with eloping and kids not losing their mind, but not wanting to leave the classroom. And so we have done some very creative things to get a kid to come out of their room to go to the office or something, whatever. I have been army crawling on the floor. One time I raced a kid in our socks because he had taken his shoes off, and I told him he probably couldn't run very fast in socks, and he's like, oh yeah, you want to bet? And he's like, let's race. So I took my shoes off, we were both in socks, and ran down the hall, but I got him to where I needed him to go. And then cars, we've raced cars, we each get a whatever little, I don't know, I don't have boys, matchbox cars, whatever, racing them down the hallway. I just the most ridiculous things to get kids down the hallway and moving, because it's just switching their brain, right? You're getting them to think about something else, but tapping into what they're interested in is just, it's been crazy. The amount of things we've done. I've climbed playgrounds and played tag and all these things just to get a kid to go where I need them to go.
I think every principal should have a notebook where they just write down the things you can't make up. And I'm stealing this from the principal that hired me into administration, but she always said, you can't make it up. I need to write a book when I retire. And yeah, I just don't think you can't make up a lot of the things that we do. So, yeah. Well, good. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm going to put you on the spot here. These are low level questions here, but just quick hitters before we go. Early arrival or staying late?
Staying late.
Morning drink of choice?
Preferably Starbucks.
You hear that, Kelly? Kelly Whitaker.
That's right.
Starbucks. Okay.
Caramel macchiato.
Would you rather handle 100 minor discipline issues in a day or one major crisis that lasts all week?
Oh, I would take the 100 minors.
Very good. I would too. Yeah. Handle that. And then last one here. The hardest part of being a school leader that nobody talks about.
I think making everybody feel valued. And I think it's because it's so important to me, but the number of tasks in a day just pull you away from that, and you can feel so busy all the time. And sometimes I have to make myself slow down and recognize when I'm not just asking people how they're doing and what's going on in their life. I'm a task oriented. I can go, but people are important, and that is important to me. So I think that's the hardest thing. That's
a really real answer, and those are the kind of things that I'm sure bother you. I know they bother me. If you feel like you've missed out on a really needed personal aspect, interaction of some sort, or because you were distracted or whatever, and it's that's a really very powerful answer. I think very relevant to everybody listening. So, well, Ariel, thank you so much for coming on to this podcast and coming in on your summer break to share what it is you're doing at Lincoln. And a shout out again to Kelly. I appreciate the outreach and sending me your name, although we have crossed paths before, but thank you for taking the time and for sharing all this. And I want to wish you a really good start to the school year that will be really here before we all know it. So.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Thank you, and I appreciate you having me on the show.
Check the notes section for more information on this episode and to learn more about the KPA and its mission to develop and support all principals through optimized learning, collaborative leadership, networking, and service. Be sure to check back in for our next episode and spread the word about cool coffee with Kansas Principals. Catch you next time.